You gotta.
Take two.
It's great.
Right.
Okay.
Great.
So sorry, we're live, everyone.
When we're live.
We're live. Yes.
Hey everyone, I believe we're actually live. Believe it or not, we've been sitting here talking for 10 or 15 minutes thinking we were live, but we weren't. So we're gonna restart our conversation, but we're all nicely warmed up now is the only advantage. As you can probably tell from this, we're trying out some new tech, so we're keeping our fingers crossed that everyone's live now. We have Laura behind the camera who's keeping an eye on things and letting us know if it does go live. So if you're not seeing this, give us a shout and we'll restart. But I think we're probably good this time around. So welcome everyone to our Knit Together. This is our December, the first of several Knit Togethers. It's me and Magali doing it together. And we just want to celebrate the knitting in December. We're doing it with the Yew Mor sweater, but you're welcome to bring anything at all that you want it in and just knit with us along through the month of December. So that's basically the whole idea of what we're doing, because a lot of us knit a lot in December, whether it's for yourself because you want something for Christmas, or maybe you're in the middle of just Christmas gifts and all the rest of it. But being able to knit with other people is a lot more fun, right, Magali?
I agree. we were just talking about that.
Yeah.
So my name is Magalie. I'm so happy to be here.
I will introduce
you.
Sorry. Properly. I will. I promise. We if you've been seeing some of our previews, I had kind of started to talk to you about Magali. Who started working with us for the last few months, and she's been working in the retail shop, and she's also been doing some of the packing with Laura. So if you walk into the shop in Cork here, the likelihood is you'll probably have a 50-50 chance of meeting Magali. But yeah, I'll open up the introduction to you then.
Yes. Thank you so much. Yes, I've been working here for I think almost a year. I think I started doing things in here a year ago, and it's been such a pleasure. I just love taking care of the shop floor and packing orders. I always feel like I'm gifting really nice presents to people, and I just get to be around the yarn all the time. And yes, I've been also doing some of the sample knits for Carol, so it's really interesting because then I get to actually work through the patterns and also kind of see like the other side of things, which I really like. And yeah, I'm just really excited to work on the Yew Mor for this December as well. Yeah.
And we were talking through. I've got a big pile of stuff here because we had started a discussion where we were talking about Yew Mor and colour samples, and I'm going to pass half of these back over here to you, and I'll take these ones. So what we were talking about here is how what colours to pick, and what to think about when you're picking colours. And there's no right or wrong. It's really more of personal choice, right? So like what I'm wearing here, I've got the loam as the background, and then there is the turf as the yoke pattern. But the big thing with this is there's really high contrast. But the one you're knitting through, let's share the colours that you're working on here.
So we have the barrow as a main colour, and we have the loam as a contrast colour. So it's going to be a very interesting kind of variation on the one you're wearing, Carol, because I think so this one is very light. It's also almost feels like an instant classic because you could wear it with everything. And while I was working on these small kind of samples, because we were just kind of looking at the contrast colors and what kind of options we could advertise, and I just obviously I love the loam as a main color, but as soon as we started working with other color, like the kind of darker colors, I was like, oh, it has a lot of character, and I really liked it. And I'm so excited to be using the barrow as a main color.
We do the swatch for the barrow is downstairs, but this kind of gives not quite the same idea, but you've got the darker turf as the background, and then you've got the loam for this, so it gives it a really different effect because it's like the inverse of a photograph, where you're looking at the negative of it.
I think we're kind of showing off different aspects of the yarn as well. I feel like with the light color as a main color, we're kind of really showing off the motif that you have around here. And then I feel like with this, I'm also going to get to show off the yarn itself, which I think is really nice because it's beautiful. It's beautiful and very soft yarn as well, but it does look very good as well.
I'm going to hold this one up as well here. So this was, you can see it's kind of a very indigo-y denim-y, I suppose. Like I love this colour. I'm like, if I'm given, like navies and greys tend to be my big colours when I'm going to go and look through stuff. But yeah, so you started off with
yes. So we kind of in preparation for today kind of started with the first page of the pattern. So this is the cast on and a few rows. Then I worked over the German short rows so we could talk about it today. And I just did the increased row. So I'm basically at the last row before starting colourwork, which we'll do later.
Yeah.
So I think it was just really nice to get a feel of the yarn as well. It was lovely to work in the round, I must say, because I was doing these in in the flat, the samples, but it's just, it kind of flows very, very nicely on the needles, like in the round. It's just like knit. It's quite nice.
Yeah. I will actually come back in a minute to ask you about the needle types, but before we forget, I do want to talk about sizing.
Yes.
And I was like, how you go about picking your own sizing when you're going to, like when you're knitting a sweater for yourself.
Yeah, and it was something I was saying, we do talk about sizing a lot, and we do talk about gauges a lot. So for the sizing, I usually measure my bust and kind of check on the pattern what kind of works. Now, so I work in centimeters, being European, but I know that a lot of people here will work in inches. And then I'm always thinking, because I tend to always fall just at the limit of one size or the other.
Yeah.
So I try to think of what I want out of the garment in the end.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's like, how are you going to wear it? Is it going to be layered over something?
Exactly.
And you want it a little oversized, or do you want it a bit more fitted?
And because I kind of, in the past I've tended to do a lot of kind of oversized and baggy things, and I feel like the Yew Mor is such a good opportunity to kind of bring it a bit closer to the body as well. And
do you ever check against, like, if you've got a sweater at home that you like the size of, would you ever kind of double check on the sizing on that? Or?
So I don't do it for myself, but I do it for my clients. So I've had because sometimes I ask when I knit for direct clients, I ask them to measure their bust, and they're not always comfortable with that. Or just they don't have the right tape measure. So I will ask them, like, what's your favorite jumper? What's the kind of size you want? Measure it and then send that to me. And I think that kind of works out well as well.
Because I mean, basically I've pulled this out because it doesn't really, on the patterns we'll always have both centimeters and inches, so it doesn't matter what it has on the tape. When you're measuring your bust, I always kind of say it's like, it's a little deceptive because we're squishy. Like you know what I mean? Like you can kind of force it to do a lot of different things. Sometimes it's what you're wearing, or even the kind of bra you've got will have an impact. So when you're measuring it, you really want somebody else to do it with you, and you take it right around the fullest, and you don't squeeze it tight. You just want it so it's just folded over. So if you hold it in the front, get someone else to hold it behind is usually, and it means that it's straight. Because if it's going to be up or down, it won't.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, that's really good advice, because I tend to do it myself, and I always have that kind of And then I think also, if you're knitting for yourself, once you know your own body and how kind of you feel in clothes as well, that's also going to help me pick one or the other size. So for this one, I was just at the limit. I was just ever so slightly over size 4.
Right. So we've got, like, a colour. So on the pattern, if you've got the pattern, it'll say at the top, like, to fit bust circumference. So those ones will include the ease, and then underneath it would have the actual sizes. So I'll call out inches just to confuse you.
Thank you.
So for the finished sizes, so if we're looking at the 4th finished size, you have 1, 2, 3, 4. So the measurements that you measure on the piece are going to be 42 inches or 1, 2, 3, or 106.5 centimeters, and that's what it is finished. But if you go back up to the suggested circumference, it is to fit up to size 40 inches or 101.5. So that means that, like, you see that the actual size is 2 inches or about 5 centimeters larger than the finished one. So that kind of, you can kind of get an idea of what it looks like. And I've also written in here what size I'm wearing. So I've knit 3rd size, and I've got about 3 inches of ease. So a little bit more than what's suggested here, because I wanted it a small bit looser. But like you said, you kind of pick how you want it to fit.
I think that's kind of that's that's what's nice about a pattern that has all of that information, including the drawing pictures.
The schematic.
The schematics,
Yeah.
thank you. At the end, because you get to have a lot of kind of agency over what you want to be doing with your knit.
Yeah.
Especially if it's something that is kind of tighter or closer to the body.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes it might be like, for me, I'm actually quite flexible in terms of bust sizes, so I don't mind if it fitted or if it's a little bigger. Like I'm okay with that. I'm much fussier about my sleeves. I hate my sleeves being too short or too tight, because you won't wear it as much. That's actually where I get fussier. Whereas the bust, I'll take quite a bit of leeway in both directions.
No, but that's such a good point though, the sleeves, because we've had this issue before as well. Is like sometimes when you move to the sleeve and you're using either like DPNs or like a different pair of needles, and then it's tighter, and there's nothing worse than having like tight sleeves. Yeah. And I'm having that with my winter jacket, and thank God it's almost, at the end of the time I'm getting it and wearing it, but it's just the sleeves are just too small, and I love wearing my big knits. Yeah. And it's just same. The bust is not really much of an issue. You can do things right, but if you can't really move your arms properly, it's just really uncomfortable. If it's that bit too short, that bit too long, then and it doesn't fit when you're doing the dishes. Like it's just something really basic, but it's like an everyday item we're doing.
As we're talking, there's one thing I should actually point out is back here, this little decoration here was made by Liz, and we just arrived here last week, and it is just gorgeous. So thank you very, very much, Liz, for sending that out. It is really, really beautiful. So that's I suppose the sizing is really the most important starting spot with this. And after that, it's kind of looking through the different techniques. And the first one is going to be taking a look at the type of cast-ons and what you can actually, basically, like what cast-ons are useful, what cast-ons are functional, and what was your favorite? Because most of us have, our go-to that we use all the time. It's not necessarily our favorite, but it's the more functional one. So I was going to ask you that, like, what's your, first of all, I'll ask you your absolute favorite that you think is the most beautiful favorite cast-on.
So you've asked me to give you an answer to that question like 3 days ago, and I've been changing like every like all the time. And so my absolute favorite, I keep changing it in my head. It's gonna be the thumb up. What I call the thumb up, or like the long trail. Okay. So yes, that's my favorite one. But like, there's another one that is kind of
seconds.
Yeah, it's like I don't know about the people that are with us what kind of cast on you're fond of, because I'm gonna do the thing.
Do any of you out there have a favorite cast on? What's your favorite cast on?
I'm gonna
or like whether it's your favorite one, or maybe it's just the one that you find the easiest and it's your go-to one. So if any of you are wondering what the thumb cast on is, Laura, I don't think our document, our other camera is working, so I'll just give it a talk through it. I'm going to grab some needles here, and I will just try and explain very quickly here. So long tail cast on, most of you have probably seen, and with the long tail cast on, you're going to have a tail as long as you need, and then you've got the working yarn. So you'll slip stitch in, and you tie it on like this. If you want a closer up of this, go on the website. We have a full tutorial on it, and you keep your tail here and your other one over here, and you hold them like this so that you can pull it in under like this and scoop it up like that. So that's the basic long tail one. But if you normally hold your yarn in your right hand, there's the thumb version of that. That's very comfortable when you're knitting with the right hand, where you keep the yarn over here and your tail over here. So you scoop with your thumb with your left hand, and then you knit the stitch over with the right, and you lift it over. Just mess that up.
No.
But
but it's
the same cast on.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah.
And I hadn't realised it because I had thought both. I had thought the two of them were different, and I'd always done the thumb method, and then someone showed me the long tail, and I was looking at the results. I'm like, they're the same thing. And we've just heard from Laura that the long tail wins. In your comments, it would appear that the long tail is the favourite cast on.
May I talk about the other one that is like a close contender? Because I've only recently started using the crochet cast on, And we were talking about this, and you were like, "Well, this is a provisional cast on," and I think that's when it's used the most. But I think it's also possible to keep it.
No, absolutely.
And it's like it gives such a nice kind of braid at the edge, and I really liked it as well. It's like
yeah. So with that one, like if you've done a provisional cast on, normally you use waste yarn, and then you crochet the chain in waste yarn, and then at that point, what you're doing is you move on to the active yarn, and so you can do it either over the needle, or you can also do it with your with the chain and then picking the stitches up. But if you go ahead and do that cast on with the main yarn you're using, you can just knit straight off it, and it gives you that little chain at the bottom.
Yeah, we have someone in the comments talking about the twisted German. Yep. If I need something stretchier, I'm not sure I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah, it's the twisted German and the old Norwegian are two names for the same one.
Okay.
And it's really like the long tail. So what it is, the long tail you have, or this version of the long tail, you've got a tail here, and you've got the other one here, and with the long tail, you scoop it off the thumb and you pull it through. And for the twisted German, you go under it, you pull that loop through, and then you pull that through. So it's almost identical, but there's one extra twist at the start.
Right.
That basically makes it just a tiny bit stretchier. But that was another one where I thought there were two totally different ones. I did a second tutorial for the old Norwegian, thinking, oh, this looks really familiar. And then I went back and I realised it was the twisted German.
Right. So, would you use it for instance, something like socks, the twisted German?
Yeah,
because to get that kind of nice stretchy.
I like it on the edge plaits as well. And if it was the like exposed at the top here, I think it would be quite a nice one.
As in, like, it's aesthetically pleasing as well as stretchy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, that's actually, in terms of this one, because it's top down, but the neck edging is done afterwards. You can actually use any cast on, because you won't see it because you're picking the stitches up afterwards.
And I think for knitting in the round, I do like the long tail cast on, because you kind of get the very kind of clean edge there, and then when you, like, for this particular purpose as well, when we pick up the stitches to get to the neckband, then it's going to be very clear where to go. So I'm excited for that bit as well. There was something I was thinking about when we started talking about cast on, is like, I started thinking about cast on as well when I was doing the swatches, actually. Because sometimes you have a really tight cast on, and then you do your swatch and you knit like just about 10 centimeters or 4 inches, and then the cast on or the cast off will actually bring the knit and the fabric together. And also, like, I also started thinking about cast on when doing swatches, just to make sure, like, what kind of stretch do we want?
It's and it's will you have a quick look through the comments there to see make sure we are answering anyone's questions that are popping up?
There's a question. When you take positive ease into consideration in your patterns, does it also make the sleeves larger or smaller too?
It wouldn't, because like it would be built in. So, like, for instance, if I started off with the body size and I said that a 40-inch bust, like measured, if someone measured it and I said I want to have 2 inches of positive ease for that, then I'll have the sleeves would be the correct fit for what I would think the 40-inch bust is. But like sleeve ease will vary too, because sometimes, like for instance with the Uskal one last summer, I had it where it was designed to have more ease in the sleeve because it was meant to be quite like more like a sweater style. So it would be, the schematic is what you actually want to check up on, because that will give you what size the sleeve is and you can actually measure around. And it goes the opposite as well. There's been times when I've done sweaters where the sweater has loads of extra ease, and then to make it look like it's fitted, I'll actually make the sleeves tighter so that you get a nice bit of contrast going. Dropping your stuff.
Yeah, like there's kind of a nice conversation. It's the one comment I'm picking up on as well when we were talking about cast on, is someone saying, like, I always need to refresh my memory. And I think that's something like I have phases of
Yeah.
like I'm just gonna do this technique
Yeah.
as much as I can
Yeah.
until it's like etched in my brain. I had
Yeah.
that for the grafting technique, and I think for cast-ons it's working as well. I'm dying to try the German one now. I think the next pair of
Yeah,
socks.
it's
Yeah,
good.
German
It's a
twisted
nice
cast
one.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, I find it hard to do on camera because it's one that's easier to do faster. So every time I try to slow it down, I end up not being able to
Yeah.
snag it. So it's really hard for me to film. But it's a pleasant one. Like it's easier to knit than it is to film. Is the best way of putting it. But it is well worth trying. The other one with this that we were kind of talking about is what method you use for working the round. Because of course, when I'm doing top-down yoke, it starts with a very small amount of stitches and then very quickly increases. And that's actually something I should kind of talk about. That it was when I started designing top-down yokes. It took me a very long time to figure out a way of getting it to size correctly, because I always knew that to get the scoop and the front down low, you had to put short rows up the back. What I didn't also realize is that you had to put increases across here, because otherwise you're building this funnel. You know, when you're doing a circular yoke, it's like a funnel, so it'll sit wherever it's meant to go on. So if you put one in and it's too tight here, it'll all sit up like this. So if you do short rows but don't do increases, the back just kind of sits up and it doesn't lie down.
Yes.
When I eventually realised that, suddenly the sweater started feeling it's fitting much more nicely,
Okay.
you know.
I always find short rows like I use them for socks a lot, the German short rows, but on a garment I always find like it's such a smart way of doing it, and I find it more difficult to kind of hold in my brain, but it's really about trusting the process and kind of really just counting your stitches. I was very careful, I counted my stitches a lot and things, but then it makes such a big difference into the way, sorry, touching the mic there, it just makes a difference on how it sits on you, and I think it does elevate the garment a lot in comparison to something that would be just randomly symmetrical.
Well, it kind of sits up, it ends up just kind of sitting in too high in the front of the neck, I think, without the short rows, you know.
And then, like, I know that if I wear a shirt with a collar, then it's going to be an issue.
We're going to take a look at the comments and down here as well, if you want to go and let us know what you're knitting on, and we're going to go share them out. And if you've got any particular technique questions, kind of maybe start talking through it as well. I'm going to start looking through some of the comments. If you want to actually talk a small bit about the different techniques you use or what your preference is for working on the round, when you go from a small circumference like that at the neck to quite quickly expanding it into a bigger size.
So for the longest time I was doing magic loop, the magic loop technique. So I very early in the knitting I kind of learned that technique to get it out of the way, and then I'm using kind of different shanks in different cables, so I'm kind of screwing in and screwing. So for the longest time I just bought the longest cable I could find in the shop, and then I was doing magic loop for everything. And I think it does the trick. It works, and it worked for many years. Now I'm knitting a lot more and more often, and I have like quite a few projects and my needles at the same time. I've actually kind of treated myself to different size cables, because after a while
you're going to use.
Yeah, exactly. So I've got the 4th size that are offered in my in my round of needles. And so for this one, I started with a 60 centimeter. I don't know my inches. I am so sorry. 60 centimeters.
I think that's about 20 inches, something like that. 24, I think.
I believe you.
Yeah.
Absolutely believe you there. So I started on this one. It was ever so slightly stretchy, which I was like, oh, perfect, because this way I won't actually have a cast on that is too tight. So I started and I just knitted in the run straight away, so I didn't use the magic loop technique. I just set my beginning of row marker, and I kind of went along that. So the first couple of rows were a bit, I had to force it ever so slightly, And then because the increases are coming in very early on, then it's just a breeze. And after that, I'll be just switching, just adding a bigger cable, because now I have all the sizes. Otherwise I would have done magic loop.
Reading through a few here, we have Sheila is making her first colourwork jumper using Jazz. What colours are you using, Sheila? I'd love to know, because we love all the colours, but I'm just always curious what people end up picking. And magic loop for sleeves, and Kathy is on the body of the Yew Mor sweater, but you're working at the moment on Alice in Wonderland double knit scarf. Ooh, sounds interesting. Dottie, you've just started the Yew Mor, and Alison is on the first big increase row after the short rows, and you need to concentrate. So you're doing your mosaic crochet blanket right now. I have to tell you that the mosaic crochet blanket sounds more complicated than short rows to me.
It really does.
But that's to a non-crocheter. And yeah. Oh, hang on. Did you say it was 20 centimeters?
No, I said 60 centimeters.
60 centimeters. Okay. Yeah. So 20 centimeters is 8 inches. So it's 8. Yeah, so it's about 20 inches. I think. Yeah. Jay Bridge is doing the Yew Mor, and you're on to the colourwork. Rhonda, you are on the body of the Yew Mor, so perfect timing for knitting and watching. Excellent. Throw any questions out that you want as we're going through, because even if we don't get them this week, we'll see them next week. And even after the fact, pop the comments up. So if you're watching this during the week and there's something you want to ask about, just put it in the comments, and we can make sure we chat through it next week as we're going through. But yeah, like for me, the figuring out how to start is always a problem, and I tend to use magic loop with the small one if I don't want to mess around with needles. But the neck of it is a little big. I find that you actually have to really push the magic loop kind of gets a little bit stretched out.
Yes. And that's something we talked about as well a couple of weeks ago, because we were working on the sugar pine. And so obviously, because it was such a tiny little jumper, I felt that my cables, I was doing magic loop, and I felt that my cable were a bit too
stiff, was it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
So it was actually stretching the air. Now with something like an Aran weight, even if the Jazz is fairly like a kind of a fine, I find fine Aran on something that at the time it was a fingering weight, and then I felt like it was really stretching. Because when I was just folding the cable together, I felt like I was really stretching. But I think it depends on the brand as well.
Yeah, because for magic loop you need super soft cables, so that when you hold them together, they're not trying to pull apart. And you were also going to, like, you were thinking about doing double pointed needles as well, which. Have you used that? What did you use it for, sleeves and things like that?
Yes, so double pointed, I used to only do socks with double pointed needles. And I was actually told not to, by my sister who also knits to not use it for the sleeves, because she tried it and she felt uncomfortable with it. Because she said, it's falling off the needle and things. And I was like, I gave it a go, because I did sleeves in magic loop again for a very long time, and it was only for my last project for a client. I was like, I was actually getting a bit bored with, a bit sick of magic loop.
You wanted a change.
I wanted to change. So I bought like bamboo double pointed needles in 4 millimeters.
And basically a little bit long, or is that?
They're actually longer. So the socks, like socks DPNs, are actually shorter than regular DPNs. So I bought regular DPNs, which meant that there was no issue with falling apart. No, not at all. And I really like working with 4 needles. I think it just keeps it interesting.
And for me, it doesn't work so well, because my knitting style, I hold my yarn in this hand and I move it more with my left, and so it means that in order to be able to move it in and out, I need a longer needle. So I'm just going to pop back here into a few of the comments. Donna, you were practicing two-handed knitting on the yoke. Excellent. It's a good time to practice. Sherry is working on the autumn season's challah cowl. Judy, you're finishing the second challah cowl, but you're getting ready to start Yew Mor. And I think, let me see, there's I missed a comment up here from Audrey. On the yoke of Yew Mor, when you're increasing around 13, do you make one by picking up the same color yarn? That's, I assume you're talking about when that in the actual color work. We will be going more into the colour work next week, but I'll actually, as you're asking the question, we will take a look at it now. But that, for me, that was actually something that because I haven't done a lot of colour work increases as I've been colour work increases as I'm going around. So I wasn't actually sure. So I ended up experimenting with both. And for the most part, what I attempted doing is I tried, if there was the two of the same colour in the row below, that's the colour I picked up. But if it was one of each, I reckon it didn't really matter as you're pulling it up. But you've actually got this, like you said, you've got the strands of both colours behind, so you can kind of pick as to which is going to work best within that pattern itself. But like, you get to discover that next week.
I get to discover that next week.
So I'd actually suggest that if you actually if you've got the first time you do the increases, if you kind of come in, you can talk a bit more about that and your experiences, and maybe even experiment with the different ones to see if you find one better than another. But it was a question as I was knitting through that came up, and my usual answer to most of is it depends. and in this case it did kind of depend on what colours were below and what colours were going to be working into that one, and because obviously you are, as you're lifting it up, you're pulling the strand from down below up, so it can have a little bit of an impact. So yeah, just whichever seems to work best in that particular situation, and we'll have a more detailed answer for you next week.
But I'll definitely be looking out for it for this one. Thank you, Audrey.
I'm looking down here as well. Jolene is finishing up the autumn seasons, and Judy, you're saying you're a bit nervous to start your Yew Mor because you're making it for your husband. That's actually, it's great, because I think it will be a really nice men's sweater. Biggest difference just being that you wouldn't do the A line going out, you just keep it straight going down, but the rest of it would actually work really well as a Yew Mor sweater. I find in terms of men's knits, the only place to keep an eye out for is if he's got wider shoulders, which more often men do. Like, not always, that's a bit of a generalization, but like often I think men tend to come out a bit wider and then go down a bit straighter. There's obviously plenty of women that are built that way as well. But if you find it's too tight on the shoulders, perhaps start increasing a bit more earlier, or you could start at a smaller size and then very quickly increase, adding a little bit more in, because I think that's the only possible place you might get stuck, but that will depend on his actual on the sizing as well. You've got the Kappa, you love the RL1 and the LL1, you've been alternating between them. It's actually one of my favourite increases as well. So one of the increases we use at the top, that have you done that one before?
Yeah,
the lifted increase?
In one of your patterns actually, but not anywhere else. I had loads of fun making that increase, because I actually wanted to ask you, because I think when I was doing it at first, I was lifting it and putting it on the needle, but after a while I kind of started knitting straight into it, and it was so quick. And it's a really nice, it's a very discreet increase. Yeah. There's not barely any holes at all in the increases. It was really fun. I understand why you like it. Yeah.
No, it's for when you're doing a load of them, it's actually a really good one. Like, the only time I found that the only time I wouldn't tend to use that is if you've got like something like a raglan where you've got stacked increases. Yeah. Because then it's pulling up on the same spot. But
and also for a raglan, you want to see the increases in a way. Whereas this is, I think you kept in the flow of knitting. Yeah. And I really liked it. And
there was a comment up here from Nancy that I had missed a while ago, was how to determine the amount of short rows. So in the pattern here, obviously it's spelled out how many short rows are put in, but if you want to make an adjustment, you can actually effectively decide how much lower you want the front than the back, because if you've got, say, if I don't know the actual row gauge of the pattern on this offhand it's 24 rows for each inch, so divided by, so it's 6 rows will give you 1 inch. So if you want an inch behind here, you're going to have 6 short rows altogether. So you go once here, here, here. So by the time you go back and forth, there will be 6 in the middle, and that will give you 1 inch higher behind here. So if you wanted it deeper, and you say, I want 2 inches, then you want 12 short rows. With this one, I quite like bringing them quite far around the front here, because it gives kind of the effect of shaping.
Yeah, so the more short rows you add, you keep going like 2 extra stitches after the double stitch every time. So it doesn't matter how far you're going.
It's going to go too far in here. So if you if you wanted to add a lot more depth to the front, You might start a little bit further back so that you have enough room, because you don't want to go any closer than here if you're doing short rows like that. Like sometimes with short rows it's just across the back, but I prefer to bring them a bit further around so that it does more of a neck shaping. And if you want more height but you don't want it all up at the top here, you can actually also do it below. So sometimes you might have it where you have short rows across here and then start doing short rows under the colour work as well, and that will actually work really well to give you the extra height but not have it all in that top section. You
It's
know?
going to sit nicely on the back. That's interesting.
I'm just reading down here. Monica, you have a 16-inch circular and a 12-inch one that gets you through most projects. That's actually the 12-inch one, particularly if you don't have the issue I have of trying to sit the needles here, a 12-inch one for sleeves is going to be great, because that's actually going to do most sleeve sizes comfortably. Like the cuff it might get a bit tight, but for the upper arm it's going to work really well.
Trying to see what 12 inches are in centimeters.
10 centimeters
30.
is 4, so it's
13.
Yeah.
No, 30.
It would 12 is 4, so it's
30. Yes, okay, yes, thank you.
It's like we've a little elf behind the camera
I'm so
today. It's great.
you'd think by now, after living here for such a long time, I would know, but no, I don't.
No, there's no reason to. And I mean, the other thing we should actually probably also, because we're right at the top, the short rows I've used are German short rows, but if you have a preference for a different type, just substitute one in. I just happen to be a big fan of German short rows.
Because they're giving such a nice result, because it's just so discreet. But we were talking about this. The wrap and turn is also an efficient way of getting short rows.
Yeah.
But yeah, the German short rows I think is just such a nice one, because it's so very it's just a nice finition, like a nice finish on it.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it,
The only danger being, because you're creating a double stitch, if you don't spot it next time round, you run the risk of potentially adding an extra stitch if you're not careful.
Or when you're counting your stitches and
Yeah.
your needles,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
don't realise that, like, I've had this many
Yeah,
times,
yeah, yeah.
and I'm still not learning. Sometimes I'm like, I have one extra stitch.
Yep.
No, it's your double stitch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a method called yarn over method, and that's even more so because it is a full method. So you know the way normally with a wrap and turn you put the wrap around the stitch. With the yarn over, you put a yarn over on the needle, which acts the same as the wrap. So it's actually, for socks, it's fantastic.
Oh, I need to try that.
It's my favorite, because you know the way with short row socks, you do short rows in here and you do short rows out. But if you're doing yarn over, they're both sitting on the needle, so it's really easy to work both of them together with the stitch.
Oh.
Really handy.
Ooh, definitely trying that.
Yeah, I don't
Yes.
use it anywhere else because
Okay.
all the others are better in other places. But for socks, yarn overs are really nice.
Ooh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. So I'm just checking down here. We've got someone who loves German short rows here, and Janice is working on quilted feather, and it's working excellent. Janice was over in Barcelona with me, and there were several of them when we were showing the quilted feather sample. Completely fell in love with it, and I've been seeing photographs of them up here, and they look great. Because Janice was kind of shared up a photograph and had done the first couple of rows because it's mohair slip stitch. But of course, until you work until about the third row of it, it doesn't really form the pattern because you have to lift the stitches up, and it just looks like you've got loose stitches. And then
Yeah, trust the process, but that's difficult. Yeah, that's
because
difficult.
it doesn't look right until you
Yeah.
get further along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Kelly, she's tried to use circular for everything. She finds double points tend to pull and stretch the sleeves if they're small, and she's never been comfortable with magic loop. A lot of people, I've heard people talk about they really hate the loops of extra cord at each side with magic loop. One variation that I haven't really used because I'm okay with magic loop is taking two shorter circulars. So
Yes.
have you used that before?
So no, but I know people that do, and yeah, apparently it's a very different feel of knitting as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually the closest to a magic loop because it's like having each half of it a magic loop. So you knit one half with this needle, and then you turn around and then you use your other needle on the other side. You know, it works very well, but it's very similar to magic loop.
Yeah. I think they're probably harder to get by these shorter ones.
Yeah.
The shorter
I mean, you could
needles.
use a long one as well.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it wouldn't really matter
Yeah.
what length it was. You know.
Okay, because I have like for Magic Loop, the one thing as well is like I can't switch my needles without watching, like, because I've done so many socks, so many DPNs. I don't have to look too much, look down too much when I'm like, depending on the yarn I'm working with, but then if I'm watching the TV and stuff.
Yeah, you should give the 2 circulars a go. Like, any circulars to see if you like it. You know, it's kind of a nice, it's a nice easy addition. Liz is like, I can't use DPNs. I always get ladders. I've heard, a lot of people have that problem with DPNs. And again, I don't use them, but something I've heard is the idea of changing where the join is. So like knit one more stitch. Do you do that when you're doing DPNs?
Okay, do you know what? That's like, because I'm making stripe-ish socks at the moment, and like, so the first thing I really wanted to try to avoid that kind of ladder. I like that word actually. I wanted to avoid that, so I was kind of picking up the stitch from the previous row, but then it was kind of, I wasn't happy with the result.
Right.
So I decided for this pair of socks, I decided to embrace the ladder, just to show, because to be fair, I like showing off as well that it's hand knit as well. So I decided to embrace the ladder. But otherwise, I think you have a few tips and tricks for kind of
for stripes. It is tricky if you're actually changing the yarn color and it's not self-striping. It's quite hard. Lifting one up below, but it's still, particularly if they're close together, it can be quite tricky. We've got somebody is knitting the second sleeve of the Ula. Jenny, you're new at both sweater knitting and colour work. I'm nervous, but you're going to give it a go. You'll get on great, because colour work, particularly on these nice big needles and big yarn, is actually really pleasant and it goes very quickly. Do give it a shot, trying the 2 colours in the colour in each hand, because you don't get things crossed over, and we'll talk a bit more next week about colour for sure. I've got
we're getting questions.
Laura has just said, what am I secret knitting? Oh, I can't tell because it's secret, can I now? I'll give a few hints. It's when I was in Barcelona, I found a yarn that I completely fell in love with. It's a over the top, insanely fluffy yarn that is a bit like holding a teddy bear. Didn't know what I was going to knit with it, but I got enough for a sweater. And then I got a contrast color, and I love it. It's like, it's going to be very simple. It's going to be a sweater. Well, it's initially, I'm saying it's going to be a sweater for me, but it will probably end up being a pattern eventually. But for right now, I'm imagining it as just for me. But it's basically like one of those skeins that you pick up, and it's so soft that all you want to do is wrap around yourself. So effectively, I am making a sweater that is the equivalent of taking a teddy bear and wrapping it around your body.
I wound that yarn earlier, and oh my god,
it's really soft.
Yeah, it's so soft.
It's
so soft. It's like
alpaca, brushed alpaca and silk. I mean, how can you go wrong, right?
Oh god.
Where are we here? This Rhonda, you can't imagine 5 needles as you have trouble holding 4 already. I'd be the same as you. I find DPNs quite hard. In fact, at one point I managed to stab myself.
Oh my god!
I had those metal long ones.
Oh, the metal ones, yeah.
It fell down and landed between the things in the sofa, and I went down to grab it. I went,
oh my god! Oh my god! Okay, so how about the bamboo ones? Like,
they're fine.
Yeah.
They're fine. This is Mary, you knit the stitch from the next needle and you keep moving the stitches around the needles to avoid gaps. Yeah, I think that seems the best way with DPNs to kind of avoid getting that ladder between each, and DPNs kind of lend itself to that as well, because you're continually, it's like you're just moving the ladder around one stitch each.
It would be pretty actually. That's a really good one, because that's kind of roughly similar to that technique when you remember when I had 2 different dial-ups for something, and you were like, oh maybe if you just kind of move the stitch around, you're kind of you're gonna blend in that.
Kelly's telling Jenny, you do great. I was very nervous with my first colour work too, and having 2 colours to work with the first time will make it much easier for you to learn. Yeah, and good luck to all of us on that, because it's a fairly straightforward one, and just take your time, and it's like once you get past that one stretch, the rest of it is like smooth sailing.
I think that's what's great about that design. I find, because like you're kind of, you're full of German short rows and increases and things, and then you go in through the colour work, and then it's just like
smooth sailing.
Yeah,
You're in the home
that's
stretch.
that's just a really nice kind of way of timing your knit.
So I'm kind of watching our time here. We should probably start wrapping it up. Before we finish off, I was just going to say we're going to have a competition where we will draw a winner next week. We put your answer in the comments below here. We leave the comments open, and if you forget the question, we put it up. But if you've been watching through, you will be able to answer this. Our question is, from earlier on in our discussion, what is Magalie's favourite cast on? So pop that answer in the questions, and we're going to give away a class, one of our online classes next week, to the lucky winner. And we'll be here at the same time next week. We're going to give another shot at trying to get the second camera to go ahead and be able to show you some of the bits in colour work, but otherwise we'll be here talking to you regardless of whether that second camera behaves itself. And I'll also encourage you all to go on over to Knit Hub. We've got come chat with other knitters in relation to what you're knitting here. We'll get a discussion going, kind of tied with kind of just a continuation of our knit together here, so that we've got our full December knit together. And I will be I'll be joining you with both my very fluffy sweater and a plain vanilla pair of socks that I'm knitting for one of my kids. So hopefully they're not listening, because it's going to be a Christmas present that may be delivered in March. But but yeah, pop all of your answers in the comments, and we will see you 2:30 next Wednesday, and we will announce the winner at the beginning of the next one. So see you then. Bye everyone.